Last night, we had baby Jenny. So I shared with you last week that, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, that our youngest daughter is a foster mom. And she's had 4 placements. And this most recent one is baby Jenny. And she's brought us a lot of joy already. She's just like 4 weeks old. And you know, she looks up at you with those eyes, and my heart just melts. We had her last night because Rebecca and a friend wanted to go out dancing. I guess that's a thing in Texas, you know, pull on your girl cowboy boots and out we go. I don't know if it's two-step dancing or whatever, but it seems like a lot of fun. They you know, my younger kids all enjoy this, do this. My son and this daughter were, you know, dancing in the kitchen hall, kitchen a couple years ago, trying to show me, and I was just hopeless. I was just hopeless. I can't do it. I can watch, I can cheer on, but I just can't do it. But she was going out last night with a friend and said, hey, you know, how would you feel if brought over baby Jenny? I mean, would you be okay watching her? And my wife and I talked, and yeah, bring her over. Bring her over. And my wife pulled the graveyard shift last night, you know, so that's where she's at, as well as some health issues, struggling with a little bit this weekend. But she was up quite a bit last night while I was sleeping. She was up with baby Jenny. But Rebecca went out with this friend dancing and said, you know, she'd be back late. And about midnight, my wife was getting ready to rest a little bit, and I was holding baby Jenny before Rebecca came home. And I was thinking about this message and this sermon about love. This is a love story. I was thinking about my own story. I was looking across the living room at the flowers I'd bought. Man, that might be a good idea to think about that. But I wanted to beat the rush. Got these beautiful flowers, all different colors, you know, roses, and sitting there in the vase on the kitchen counter, and I was looking at them and just remembering my own love story, my wife. And the night before we met, I was writing a letter to some friends saying, I pray God would just miraculously drop a wife into my life, and He did. So I'm holding this precious little girl. And here are the keys at the door, and as Rebecca was returning home and coming back in, she unlocked the door, came in. I said, hi, sweetheart, how was it? And she said, I met a boy. She said, he's a Christian and a good dancer. She said, he's strong. She said, you know, I usually don't let guys dip me because I'm afraid they're going to drop me. She said, but let him dip me, I thought. I think I can trust him. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about this story and thinking about my wife, the man she married, thinking about my daughter, the man I hope that she'll marry someday. Think about little baby Jenny. And, you know, you want a man who's strong in your life. You want a man that you can trust in your life. You want a man who's not going to drop you. You know, as we look at this love story, the love story of Ruth and Boaz, the love story of God for us. The barley harvest was just beginning. You know, it was just so difficult. Naomi didn't understand. I mean, God had given her a man. God had given her 2 sons, and then He'd taken them away. They'd been in this foreign land for at least 10 years because there'd been famine in Bethlehem. Her sons had and then died after her husband had died. When she heard that there was rain back home. She returned home. Everyone said, "Is this Naomi?" She said, "Don't call me Naomi," which means pleasant. Call me bitter. Because I went away full, but I've come back empty. She thought she was empty. But she had Ruth. And she had a relative on her husband's side that she wasn't thinking about. She wasn't quite empty. And Boaz was a man of standing, a mighty man, a powerful man, a strong man. And then there was Ruth. Ruth had said, "Let me glean in the fields behind the reapers and get some food for us." And it just so happened she found the field of Boaz. And you may remember last time I spoke that when she came home with all this food from her gleanings, that Naomi said to her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." And Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one whose place she had been working. "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz." And remember, even though she'd gone through all this difficulty, even though her heart was broken, she felt stomped on, and she probably felt just like dying, because she was, Naomi, inside. That when she heard this news, it was like water on a dry cactus in the desert, and all of a sudden it began to bloom. She said, "The Lord bless him." She said, "The Lord bless him. He's not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. That man's our close relative. He's one of our kinsmen redeemers. Part of the family, part of one who family was supposed to take care of family. We're still supposed to, but back then it was kind of more codified, and if you sold a field, if you had to sell yourself into slavery, a family member was responsible, if they were able, to try and redeem you, to buy you back, to rescue you, to deliver you. Boaz was a close relative. And in showing favor to her, he was showing favor to Naomi, to the family, the living, as well as the dead. We pick up the story in Ruth chapter 3. Would you stand with me as I read this morning? But Ruth chapter 3, the story continues. We're told that one day, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not try and find a home for you where you'll be well provided for?" Now Boaz, with whose women you've worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, get dressed in your best clothes, then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you're there till he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he's lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He'll tell you what to do. I'll do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating, drinking, was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly and covered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm your servant Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you're a guardian redeemer, a kinsman redeemer of our family. The Lord bless you." Lord bless you, daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed before. You've not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. Now, my daughter, don't be afraid. Do for you all you ask. All the people in my town know that you're a woman of noble character. Although it's true that I'm a kinsman redeemer, a guardian redeemer of our family, there's another who's more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your kinsman redeemer, guardian redeemer. Good, let him redeem you. But if he's not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, no one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor. He also said, bring me the shawl you're wearing and hold it out. When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, how did it go, my daughter? And she told her everything Boaz had done for her, and added, he gave me this 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said, my daughter, till you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. You may be seated. We're in the middle of a love story. And you know, it's not just the love story of Ruth. We're in the middle of the love story of God's love for you, God's love for me. Just like Naomi and Ruth, depending on where you're at in this phase, season, chapter of your life, it might be maybe really, really hard. But it's not over. And it's a love story, and we know how it ends. It's going to end more amazing than you could ever imagine. For those of us who know Christ as Savior, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. You know, for Ruth and Naomi, they never could have imagined, after all that had happened, after all that pain, after returning home, they didn't know the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The barley harvest was just beginning, a foreshadowing at the end of chapter 1. They needed food. Naomi was maybe ready to just give it up, just stop eating, wasn't hungry anymore. What's the point of living? Ruth said, let me go glean. Let me find food. Naomi said, go. And it just so happened. She was in the field. Boaz. What a man of standing, a man of valor, a man of substance. A Hayil Gabor, remember? Gabor means a mighty man. Hayil, a man of substance, of wealth, of power, of virtue, of character. And in this story, the same word is used of Ruth. Everyone knows that you're a Hayil woman, a woman of character, a woman of virtue, of noble character. What a woman. And as you and I read this story, and as you picture these two, I mean, doesn't your heart just soar thinking, you know, if you have a daughter, I hope she finds somebody like this guy. You know, as you think of Ruth, I mean, you can't help but think she had to be beautiful, right? I mean, the story just wouldn't work if she wasn't beautiful, right? But the reality, we think that way because she is beautiful, totally apart from however she looked. What a woman! You know, faithful to her mother-in-law, I'm going to share my life with you. Whatever pain and heartache you go through, I am not going to leave you. I am not going to leave you. Life can appear a tangle of unconnected threads, yet there is a sovereign God who loves us. Ruth kept close to Boaz's servant girls, gleaning until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, the last verse of chapter 2. And Naomi must have been thinking, you know, not only did family have responsibility for family, but if a Man died, his brother was responsible to take the widow in as a wife and raise up children for her, for the family in the name of his deceased brother, to care for her in her old age, to continue the family line. And yet, Naomi had no more children. But she did have a Gaol, a kinsman redeemer. And I wonder if she thought. He has no required responsibility to do this, but I wonder if he might take Ruth into his home and fulfill the responsibility of the brother-in-law, the levirate law of the Old Testament, in which a brother, a close family member, would take in that widow, would marry her, and would raise up children for her and for the family to carry on the name. And so we read of Naomi's plan in verses 1 through 5, right? And if you have kids, and especially adult kids, right, as parents, we plan. We are looking for that guy or for that gal who would be a blessing to our children. So we read in verse 1, one day, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not try and find a home for you where you'll be well provided for?" You know, Ruth was a Moabitess. She had no one but Naomi. Naomi was getting older. And Ruth had no one. Naomi had no one, but she had Ruth. She had distant family relations, but Ruth had no one. And Naomi said, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you where you'll be well provided for? Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you've been, a kinsman of ours? Tonight he'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. It's the end of the season, and he'll be celebrating, and they'll be throwing a party and a festive occasion because God has provided yet again." She said, "Wash, perfume yourself, put on your best clothes, go down the threshing floor, but don't let him know you're there until he's finished eating and drinking. And when he lies down, note the place where he's lying. Then go, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." Verse 5, "I'll do whatever you say," Ruth answered. This was a family thing. You know, and it's interesting as we read the story, it's amazing. And as we read the story, you know, this is just so different than America. You know what? I want to see a picture. Right? And who's this guy? You can't just marry anybody and think it's going to work unless you're a person of Ha'il, a person of virtuous, noble character. You know, as you get older and, you know, you lose your strength, your good looks, maybe some of the outer, external things that first attracted you to one another, right? The substance of the relationship is the person, right? Charm is deceptive. You know, the king's wife said to the king, Lemuel's mother, right, said to him in Proverbs 31, "Charm is deceptive. Beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord, she's to be praised," right? Proverbs 31:10, "A noble wife who can find, she's worth far more than rubies." Proverbs 12:4, "A noble wife is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is decay in his bones." But you know, Boaz said of Ruth, "Everyone knows you are a woman of noble character." And, you know, Ruth, you look at the story, and she felt like, because she was an outsider. She was a Moabite. She was a foreigner. right? I'm sure by some of the women, they spoke meanly to her and about her. Probably every woman's experienced some of that, and it hurts. It hurts. And Boaz, we don't know a lot about his story, and it never says it here in the book, but you know who his mother was? Rahab, the prostitute. Unless he was the grandson or great of her. Sometimes they say, his mother was Ruth, but Rahab, but it might have, that's in the story of the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. And it kind of gives the broad story of the lineage of Jesus Christ, but Boaz and Ruth are in it. So this is interesting that Naomi would have the love to have a care and concern for her daughter-in-law, because if she marries, then what does Naomi have? Now, hopefully, children. But she was thinking of Ruth. And Ruth, I'll do whatever you say. She didn't have to. I mean, this wasn't a blood brother of her deceased husband. As Boaz said, she could have gone after anybody. And yet instead, she wanted to honor the name of her deceased husband. She wanted to honor her mother-in-law. She said, I'll do whatever you say. I mean, from all appearances, from all that we gather, it seems like maybe Boaz was quite a bit older. He said, Ruth, this kindness is greater than anything you've so far done. Rather than marrying a young man or someone else, that you would try and stay in the family and ask me to be your husband. And right, they were wondering, must have wondered, I wonder how he's going to respond. He had no duty, nothing required of him that would say he had to do this. If he did it at all, it would have been just out of kindness and love. So we see Naomi's plan in verses 1 through 5, and then Ruth's courageous loyalty. She didn't have to do this. And yet she did, and God blessed it. And oh my word, right? I'd love a man like Boaz for my daughters. I'd love a woman like Ruth for my sons. And they were matched in character. This was a godly man and a godly woman. So we see her courage. I mean, right? What woman would do something like this? And a poor servant foreigner girl approaching this man of wealth and standing and reputation, and that she'd have the guts to do this. This had to take a lot of courage and a lot of love for her mother-in-law. But she said, I'll do whatever you say. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking, was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly and covered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I'm your servant Ruth, she said. And I wonder if she was just trembling with fear. What's he going to do? What's he going to say? This is pretty bold. But she did it. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. So here it was. What was he going to do? Right? And he had the opportunity. I mean, her life was in his hands, right? If he said, thanks, not interested. Can you imagine how crushed she would have been? How filled with shame? This took a lot of courage, a lot of guts. as we read the story, he wasn't even the nearest. He wasn't the nearest who had, he didn't have the responsibility. The nearest didn't have the responsibility. But he didn't even have the right. And some commentators have said, I wonder if Naomi knew this. I think she did. I think she did. Do you know your family? And who's related to you? I think probably. But she thought, I wonder if it's Boaz. The one. And from everything I know about this man, whether required or not, I think he will. And they were not wrong, right? He wakes up in the middle of the night, finds this woman at his feet, and he could have shamed her, he could have disgraced her, but he could have taken advantage of her. She was vulnerable. Part of love, too, is making yourself vulnerable, and that is scary, isn't it? It's very scary, right? For all of us who are married, just one degree or another, you have to make yourself vulnerable, and some of us still aren't so sure about that, right? And still struggle with that, because it is hard. You just... you're exposed, you're vulnerable. You can be crushed. In the intimacy of marriage, you invite somebody into your soul. And if they're not careful, it can cause a lot of pain. Ruth said, I'm your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. I wonder if this had ever crossed Boaz's mind. It probably was there somewhere, but he was older and she was younger, and she was probably young and beautiful and could have her pick of the men if she wanted to. Despite maybe some of the bad talk that maybe some of the other women in town, flung Ruth's way. There's sometimes a sense in which somebody from a different background is alluring and interesting to men, just maybe because she's different and carries a different kind of beauty. But he said, the Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness, this hesed, this steadfast, loyal love to your mother, to your mother-in-law, to your deceased husband, to the family, that you would stay within the family so that the name of the deceased might not die out. This kindness is greater than that which you've shown earlier. You've not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor, and now, my daughter, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character, a woman of Ha'il. Although it's true that I'm near of kin, there's a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to be redeemed, because only he has the right, I don't have the right. Good, let him redeem. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here till morning. We read this story and think of it, and it's like, what in the world? Middle of the night? And, this, as my kids would say, this sounds sketchy. Right? But from the character of these two, I don't know what's going on. It seems to be something cultural, but it was not sketchy. In the sense, it could have been misconstrued that way. But she was approaching him silently, maybe, quietly, maybe in the middle of the night, so that he'd have the freedom to say no. He was under no responsibility to do anything. I don't totally understand the cultural stuff going on here, but everything about this story, everything about Boaz, everything about Ruth tells us that what they did was not sketchy at all, but honoring to God, honoring to one another. In the middle of the night, nothing happened. There was another who had the right to redeem. And Boaz told Ruth, I don't have that right, but I will talk to the man, and if he redeems you and fulfills that responsibility, good. You know, I accept that. I'll accept that from God. But if not, I will. We see in verses 10 through 15, you know, his gracious generosity, his amazing, right, response. He said, stay here for the night, verse 12. In the morning, if he wants to redeem, good, let him redeem. But if not, I will lie here until morning. He didn't want her to go home in the middle of the night. He didn't want her being hurt or harmed in any way. You know, stay here. You'll be safe here till the morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor, wanted to protect not only her person, he protected his purity. I mean, he didn't do anything. He didn't take advantage of her in the middle of the night. And even protecting her reputation, right? And again, I wonder if part of it was just, okay, this was bold, and Boaz had every right to say no. And yet they thought, I trust him. You know, my daughter, he's strong. I don't think he'll drop me. I trust him. So she laid his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he also said, bring me the shawl you're wearing and hold it out. And when he did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and put it on her, and she went back to town. And so we see in these last couple verses the promise of redemption. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, how did it go, my daughter? What did the Lord do? Then Ruth told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Empty. Those days were over. God was on the move. God was at work. You know, however things turned out, they were not going to be empty ever again. You know, and it wasn't just about Boaz. It was about the family and the family name. But one way or another, Ruth was going to be redeemed. And not only Ruth, Naomi. One way or another. But I bet they were all rooting for Boaz. I think Boaz was rooting for Boaz. What a woman. What a woman. We read in verse, 16 through 18, she told her everything Boaz had done for her, and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said, wait, daughter, till you find out what happens, for the man will not rest till the matter is settled today. Right? You women know us, men. Every woman would know, okay, just wait. See what the men do, right? Boaz is going to battle in the city gates, and he's going to find that man, and it's going to happen today. Wait. You know, it isn't one of the hardest parts of life and of this pain and of this emptiness and of the brokenness of this world, of your world, of my world, waiting. Psalm 27, verse 14, wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. For crying out loud, we're Americans. We hate to wait, right? You ever switch lines just because there's one shorter than the other line? Okay, some of you are better drivers than me. I mean, even coming to Johnson City, you know, if there are 3 cars here, 2 here, I switch. Wait, my daughter, till you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. You know, Naomi eagerly sought to know the outcome of Ruth's adventure, and predicted Boaz would quickly resolve the issue that day. Whatever the outcome as to who the Redeemer would be Ruth and Naomi's day of redemption. Their lives would never be empty again. You know, I was thinking about this, right? Our fear is he's going to drop us, right? And, you know, let's broaden it beyond our wives, our daughters, women. Truth be told, right? We struggle to trust him, right? And you women struggle to trust our men. And right, I told you the story of me leading my wife down the wrong way of 15th Street in downtown Austin. She followed me. It's like, what in the world? I trusted this guy. He dropped me. Right? God's grace. He spared her and spared me. But you know, the Lord never drops us. But just like my daughter said, you know, usually I don't let a guy dip me because I'm afraid he'll drop me, right? You got to know what you're doing. You know, if a girl kind of gives herself to a guy and dancing in terms of him dipping her and he doesn't know what he's doing, she gets dropped. I mean, you know, maybe that's why a lot of you women have, you know, kind of some wounds in the back of your head, because somebody's dropped you. But you know, that's all of our issue with the Lord. You know, interestingly, he will never drop you. That's not the variable in the equation. The variable in the equation is, do you trust him? Right? Do you trust him? Because he's strong. Oh, is he strong. Our faith and trust in him will not be disappointed. He's El Gabor, the mighty God. What a story, huh? What a story of love. So this is a love story, and beyond just the boy-girl thing, right? Beyond whatever happens with my daughter, you know, I every time maybe she meets some guy, she said this guy asked her about church. You go to this, that he asked her, right? And I've drilled in my kids, you know, try, okay. Most important thing is, does he or she love Jesus? That's the most important thing. I mean, you know, you want to be attracted to the person, but the most important thing, right, is not the frosting on the cake. It's the cake. It's the person, right, that you're going to share the rest of your life with. But she said, you know, Dad, he asked me where I went to church. He's strong. She thought, you know, he wanted to dip me, and I let him. I thought, I trust him. He's not going to drop me. So here's the question to you. I'm telling you from this, he's not going to drop you. The question is, do you trust him? Because he can't dip you if you don't trust him. You won't let him. But you should let him, because he's strong. And strong, not just in the ability to, you know, strong crush somebody, but strong in his steadfast, faithful, never changing, never dropping you, faithful, dependable love. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this love story. Thank you for this example of a man and a woman with feet of clay, just like you and me. And you know, Ruth was probably shaking in her cowboy boots if she was wearing them to that evening meeting. But Lord, you were going before them. Naomi felt like she'd gone away full and came back empty, and yet not totally empty. She had Ruth. she had a relative. And even more, she had El Gabor, the mighty God, who had not forgotten her, who in spite of her pain loved her and was working out his perfect plan. Oh God, this is love, not that we loved you, but that you loved us and sent your Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sin. Oh Lord, you are mighty, you are strong, you will not drop us. Help us to trust you. Oh Lord, help us. Thank you for hearing our prayer. Thank you for your love. In Jesus' name, amen.